Regaining his senses in the intensive care unit, the affluent man caught fragments of his wife's hushed phone conversation. The words about his will sent a shock wave through him, prompting a desperate act. James snapped awake as though an unseen force had jolted him into consciousness. His body remained unresponsive, so he barely opened his eyes, squinting at the blinding whiteness of the room around him. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Dear God, where am I? Why does my body feel so frail and powerless? How did I end up in this place? He whispered hoarsely. His answer came from the faint beeps and hums of various medical devices nearby. Straining to piece together his thoughts, James realized he was in a hospital. But the questions gnawed at him. How had he ended up here? And what had transpired to bring him to this point? The glaring lights overhead made focusing difficult, and a relentless buzzing in his ears felt like an alarm blaring in his mind. His consciousness was swiftly invaded by a stabbing pain that made him groan softly. An intense thirst clawed at his throat, but there was no one to help, and no water within reach. There was no mistaking it, he was in a hospital room. But why was it filled with so much machinery? James had never been in such a place before. It was an alien world of tubes and monitors. IV lines and various sensors connected him to the bed, leaving him feeling weightless and powerless. His eyelids were heavy, and he could only see the world through narrow slits. Initially, the sounds around him were muffled and distant, making him wonder if he could hear anything at all. Then, he heard a familiar voice, stirring a rush of emotion within him. It was his wife, Grace. Her unique intonation and the slight purr in her speech were unmistakable. James's heart pounded with a mix of hope and anxiety as he tried to signal her, but then he heard the creak of the door opening. The businessman gathered his fragmented thoughts, bracing for the words he never expected to hear. "Dr. Merritt, hello. Please tell me, how is my husband doing? Will he remain like this, suffering endlessly? Should we consider more drastic measures?" Grace's voice was laced with a desperate, almost mournful tone. A heavy silence filled the room before the doctor finally responded. "I will give you one piece of advice. Do not tempt fate. Hold on to hope. Your husband's chances are slim, but you must not give up. Additionally, I advise you to spend minimal time near him to avoid the risk of infection. We will inform you of any progress immediately. For now, I strongly suggest you leave the room." "Of course you're right." "I'm sorry, I understand," Grace replied, her voice syrupy sweet. Shortly after, James heard the retreating footsteps and the door closing, realizing that Dr. Merritt had left, but Grace remained beside him, lost in contemplation. Suddenly, the distinct ring of a telephone broke the sterile silence of the intensive care unit. The sound was so out of place that it made James question the reality of his surroundings. James had always despised eavesdropping, viewing it as a dishonorable act beneath someone of his standing. He was, after all, the proud owner of one of the city's finest restaurants. Under normal circumstances, he would have excused himself to allow Grace privacy. But now, trapped in his incapacitated body, he had no choice but to listen. "Hello, darling, is that you? Your number looks unfamiliar. Did you get a new one again?" "The will, yes, I've written it. Where is it going?" "Yes, I've reviewed it. Everything is as I wanted. Thanks to the notary for his help, though it wasn't free, of course. But you know, you have to pay for everything." Grace's words sent a surge of rage through James's veins. Who is Grace speaking to with such sugary affection? The entire situation felt surreal. The mention of a will only deepened his alarm. Then, her next words shattered any lingering doubts. "Yes, darling, I just came into the room. What can I say? My dear lies there like a vegetable. No changes. I think I'll manage the restaurant as I see fit, and when James is gone, I'll inherit it properly. Well, I'll go now. I have things to do. I love you. Goodbye for now." The realization hit James like a tidal wave. Grace's betrayal was not just a stab in the back, it was a full-blown conspiracy against his life. Every sweet word she spoke now tasted bitter, and the love he thought he knew was revealed as nothing more than a cruel facade. The pain of his physical condition was now matched by the searing agony of his broken heart. Such audacity left James breathless. The thought of his wife speaking so callously about his imminent death and referring to him as a vegetable was beyond comprehension. Did he deserve such heartless treatment? As he lay helpless on the hospital bed, he wondered why the sensors, meant to alert the medical staff to his regained consciousness, had failed. It reminded him of a scene from a domestic film, the title of which eluded him, but the memory of the plot remained vivid. Watching such a scenario unfold on screen was one thing, but experiencing it firsthand, especially when it involved his wife's betrayal, was a whole different ordeal. James was certain now that she had betrayed him. But amidst his confusion and heartbreak, a question gnawed at him: who had pulled him from the fiery wreckage of his car? Who had risked their life to save him? As his mind clouded, memories of that fateful day began to resurface. The morning of elite restaurant owner James Williams began like any other, indistinguishable from countless mornings before it. He rose with the first light of dawn, a time when most of the city was still wrapped in the tranquility of sleep. From the large windows of his house, he could see the city gradually coming to life, preparing for the daily hustle and bustle. James's morning routine was simple yet fulfilling. He prepared a nutritious breakfast, starting with a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice and quickly frying eggs with bacon. A few minutes of gymnastics followed, ensuring his body was fully awake and his muscles limber. A firm believer in a healthy lifestyle, James never imposed his habits on Grace. Each person was unique, and Grace was no exception. James, for instance, adhered to a vegetarian diet and abstained from animal products. He respected the choices of those who consumed meat, understanding that everyone had their preferences. With his breakfast ready, James carried his tray to the spacious terrace. Despite it being winter, the terrace was enclosed, warmed by a small fireplace crackling in the corner. He relished the fresh morning air and the silence, contemplating the day's agenda to ensure all his plans could be accomplished. Grace was still asleep during these early hours, leaving James with a sense of solitude. The peaceful solitude of the terrace offered a stark contrast to the chaos that would later ensue. As he sat there, lost in his thoughts, he had no inkling of the storm that was brewing. The betrayal by Grace and the mysterious accident would soon shatter his world, leaving him to grapple with not just physical pain, but the deep emotional scars of trust broken and love lost. The morning air, once so refreshing, now seemed a distant memory as James lay in the hospital, piecing together the fragments of his shattered life. After breakfast, the businessman meticulously dressed in his favorite business suit and headed out for work. He prided himself on arriving before the restaurant opened, keen to observe who showed up on time and who didn't. Punctuality was important to him, though he was lenient with those who had genuine reasons for being late, like Emma, the dishwasher who lived on the outskirts of the city and relied on an unpredictable bus service. James understood all too well the challenges of public transportation, especially when the weather threw a wrench into the city's routine and the municipal workers struggled with the aftermath of a storm. That day, fate took a cruel turn as snow began to fall early in the morning. At first, it descended gently, swirling in delicate flurries created by the wind. But soon, it turned into a heavy snowfall, quickly blanketing the city in white. James had always loved snow, despite knowing that such weather usually meant fewer customers. On days when a blizzard raged outside, people tended to stay home rather than venture out to enjoy a meal at his restaurant. Upon arriving at the entrance, James parked his car and braced himself, raising the collar of his coat before stepping into the biting cold. A sharp gust of wind flung snow into his face, making him shiver and quicken his pace. Henry, the janitor, was already hard at work, shoveling the steps clear of snow. As James approached, Henry greeted him with a wave. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. The snow's coming down today, isn't it? Makes these old bones ache." "Good morning, Henry. Are you still tackling the snow on your own? I told the security guard to give you a hand during times like these," James replied, concerned. But Henry dismissed the offer with a wave. "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm fine. I can handle it, James. It's a good workout for me. A few swings of the shovel and I'm warmed up and feeling normal again." James chuckled. "Exercise, you say? Well, hand me that shovel then. I could use a bit of warming up myself." Henry laughed and passed the shovel to James, who took it with a smile. The two of them worked side by side, the camaraderie warming their spirits, even as the wind continued to howl around them. James found a peculiar satisfaction in the physical labor, a stark contrast to the mental exertion of running a restaurant. As they cleared the snow, James's thoughts wandered back to his plans for the day, unaware of the storm brewing in his personal life. The snow continued to fall, the flakes swirling and settling around them. James's thoughts momentarily drifted to Grace, still asleep at home, oblivious to the wintry scene unfolding outside. He often felt a pang of loneliness during these early hours, a stark contrast to the busy, vibrant atmosphere of the restaurant later in the day. He cherished these quiet moments, even if they came with a sense of solitude. Little did he know, this day would be unlike any other. The peaceful rhythm of his morning routine would soon be shattered, and the betrayal by his wife would leave a mark deeper than any physical wound. As he shoveled snow alongside Henry, James couldn't have imagined the challenges and heartbreak that lay ahead, ready to test his resilience and spirit in ways he had never anticipated. The janitor's attempts to object were futile as the resolute young manager remained steadfast, his determination unwavering until he confiscated the essential tool from him. Amidst the swirling snowstorm, pedestrians passing the restaurant cast curious glances at the esteemed businessmen who adeptly maneuvered a shovel, tirelessly clearing the snow-laden steps. Henry acknowledged with a respectful nod. "You're quite adept at this, James. How did you acquire such proficiency?" James beamed. "Where else but the village? At my grandfather's place on the remote outskirts. He had a lot of fishing spots there. I'm not much into hunting, but foraging for mushrooms, berries, or fishing. Always game for that. Winters brought heavy snow. You'd wake up to a cabin cloaked in darkness. Snow piled against the windows. Out came the shovel, and off you'd go." The janitor gazed at the restaurant owner with open admiration. James was a kind-hearted man, never belittling him with harsh words or actions. He often defended him, especially against the overbearing administrator who reveled in tormenting the vulnerable. "I recall that bully, and there he is. Mr. Williams, what are you doing out here? The wind is fierce, and you're shoveling snow. You'll catch your death. What would we do without you?" Andrew hollered, battling the wind. James turned, meeting Andrew's gaze, fully aware of his insincerity and blatant flattery. "Oh, come on, Andrew. It's no big deal. I'm not a child. Tell me, how are things at the restaurant? Have the suppliers held up their end, and is everyone on duty?" Andrew's face contorted as if in pain at the mention of the latter. Battling the biting wind, he replied, "Yes, all are in order, except that dishwasher. Emma, I believe. No matter the reprimands, she's never on time." James cast a disapproving glance at Andrew, passing the shovel back to the janitor. "Andrew, you know very well that Emma is raising 4 children on her own. I've asked you not to call her a dishwasher. Emma is a kitchen worker and a vital member of our team. Show some respect to your subordinates. Without that, you can't foster a healthy work environment." The boss's sharp remark cut through the air like a knife, causing the administrator to shiver involuntarily. He stole a furtive glance at the janitor, fearing the worst. What if he had overheard? The thought of it was mortifying. And there he was, the janitor, grinning from ear to ear, clearly having caught every word. How shameless. Well, it didn't matter. They would deal with him later. First, they needed to get the boss out of the way. Then they could tighten the screws on everyone else. Just then, the stooped figure of a young woman emerged from around the corner, struggling through the heavy snow as she hurried to work. "Oh, here comes Emma Fisher. What's your excuse this time? Did the bus break down, or have you come up with something even more elaborate?" The administrator started to berate her but stopped short under the intense gaze of James. "Sorry, Mr. Brown. The bus got rerouted on the road, and I had to find an alternative way to get here," Emma replied, her voice tinged with apology as she lowered her eyes, avoiding direct contact. Her nose reddened from the biting cold. James's tone softened as he said, "All right, get inside and make sure everything is in perfect order. I want those dishes so clean they squeak when I touch them." Andrew added with a stern expression. Emma nodded quickly and made her way towards the entrance, her pace quickening. As she reached the steps, she stumbled awkwardly, her boot losing its grip on the icy surface. James reacted instinctively, moving swiftly to catch her before she could fall. "Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry for being so clumsy," she stammered, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "There's no need to apologize, Emma. It's not your fault. Perhaps Andrew should finally get to work and spread some salt on these slippery steps," James remarked, his voice carrying a hint of reprimand as he emphasized the last word. He then took Emma's hand to help her up the steps, noticing how warm her hand felt despite the freezing temperature. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. Emma gasped loudly and jerked her hand away, her eyes wide with surprise. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" James asked, his voice filled with concern and genuine worry. Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of shock and confusion. No, I'm not hurt. It's just your touch." "It felt so warm, like a spark of energy," she explained, her voice trembling slightly. James looked at her, puzzled but also intrigued. "A spark of energy? What do you mean?" Emma hesitated, looking down at her hand. "I don't know how to explain it. It was like a surge of warmth, comforting and reassuring. I've never felt anything like it before." James smiled gently, trying to ease her discomfort. "Well, maybe it's just a sign that we're all connected in some way, even through the smallest acts of kindness. Now, go inside and take care of your duties. And Andrew." He turned to the administrator. "Make sure to get that salt on the steps. We can't have anyone else slipping." Andrew, still somewhat shaken by the earlier reprimand, nodded hastily and muttered, "Yes, Mr. Williams. I'll take care of it right away." As Emma hurried inside, James stood for a moment, watching her go. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her words. He glanced back at the janitor, who was now busily shoveling the snow with renewed vigor, clearly enjoying the spectacle that had just unfolded. James turned his attention back to the task at hand. The snow was relentless, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had a team to lead, a business to run, and people who depended on him. And perhaps, just perhaps, there was a bit of magic in the way their lives intersected, in the warmth of a helping hand, in the small moments of connection that made the cold winter days a little brighter. The janitor, observing James from a distance, couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration. Despite the harsh conditions and the challenges they faced, James remained steadfast and kind-hearted, always willing to lend a hand and offer support. It was these small acts of kindness that made him a respected leader, not just in title but in the hearts of those who worked for him. Emma lowered her gaze, her hands clenching into fists. She looked frightened, almost a shadow of herself. "I'm sorry. Please, it's not your fault at all. It must have been my imagination. "Sorry again," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The fear in her eyes was palpable, almost as if it seeped into James's skin. What could he have done wrong? Had he squeezed her hand too tightly? No, that didn't seem right. Shaking his head in bewilderment, he hurried after Emma. James caught up with her in the hallway, calling out softly to avoid drawing attention. "Emma, what happened? Why did you react so strangely?" She halted, turning to face him with an expression of strange pity. "I'm sorry. It's all because of my visions." "Visions," James repeated, his confusion growing. Emma's face paled. "Yes, the ones that come true, like premonitions, but real. They started back in school when I got a concussion during a PE class. We were climbing a rope and I fell. The height wasn't much, but that's when it all began." James frowned, concern etching his features. "And what did you see in these visions?" Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. "It's a car accident." "What color is your car?" "Dark green," he replied, puzzled by her question. "When I touched your hand, I immediately understood. That car will be involved in a terrible accident, but it won't be your fault. It will be someone very close to you. I saw it the moment I touched your hand. It struck me like lightning." James looked at her with a mix of skepticism and irony. He didn't believe in prophecies or supernatural visions. To him, it was all nonsense. Fortune tellers and seers were just charlatans preying on the gullible. He recalled a madam who had predicted a long and thorny path to success for him during his student years. Sure, the journey had been arduous, but it was hard work, not any mystical prediction, that had paved his way. "Emma," he began gently, "I appreciate your concern, but you must understand that I don't believe in prophecies or visions. Success, accidents, these things are all part of life and not dictated by some supernatural force." Emma's tears flowed freely now. "I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth. I just felt compelled to warn you. Please be careful. It's not something I can easily ignore." James sighed, his heart softening at her genuine distress. "All right, Emma, I'll be cautious. But let's keep this between us, okay? No need to worry everyone else." Emma nodded, relief mingled with lingering fear in her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Williams. I hope I'm wrong. I truly do." With a reassuring nod, James watched as Emma made her way back to her duties. He couldn't shake the unease that had settled in his chest. Rational or not, Emma's sincerity was undeniable, and it left him with a sense of foreboding he couldn't quite dismiss. The administrator, lurking nearby, had overheard enough to pique his curiosity. He approached James with a feigned concern. "Is everything all right, Mr. Williams?" James shot him a wary look. "Everything is fine, Andrew. Just make sure the staff is taken care of and the restaurant runs smoothly. We've got a busy day ahead." Andrew nodded, his mind already spinning with thoughts on how to exploit the situation. As he walked away, a smirk played on his lips. Little did he know, his scheming would soon backfire in ways he could not imagine. James, meanwhile, stood by the window, staring out at the snow-covered streets. His mind replayed Emma's words. Despite his skepticism, the image of his dark green car involved in an accident kept flashing before his eyes. It was unsettling. Perhaps he would take a different route home tonight, just in case. As the day wore on, the restaurant buzzed with activity. James couldn't help but notice Emma's diligent efforts. She worked tirelessly, her usual clumsiness replaced by a focused determination. He admired her resilience despite her evident fear. In the quiet moments, James found himself reflecting on the fragility of life. Whether or not Emma's vision held any truth, it was a stark reminder of how quickly things could change. He resolved to cherish the moments and the people around him even more, recognizing the delicate balance between fate and free will. By evening, the snowstorm had intensified. James decided to heed Emma's warning, even if just to ease her worry. He informed his staff that he would be leaving early and made his way to the parking lot. His dark green car sat there, covered in a fresh layer of snow. He brushed it off, contemplating the day's strange events. Driving home, James took a different route, one that was longer but felt safer. He couldn't shake the feeling of being watched over, protected by an unseen force. As he pulled into his driveway, he let out a sigh of relief. The journey had been uneventful, but the experience had left a mark. Entering his home, James resolved to take Emma's words to heart, not in fear, but as a reminder to live fully and appreciate each day. He smiled, thinking of the warmth in Emma's touch, a simple gesture that had sparked a profound realization in him. Life was unpredictable, but it was those unexpected moments that often brought the most clarity and purpose. Emma looked at her boss with genuine concern, aware that he didn't believe a word she said. "Please, Mr. Williams, I urge you to refrain from driving shortly," she insisted, her voice tinged with desperation. James just smiled reassuringly. "Oh, don't worry, Emma. I've been driving for over 10 years without any issues. I never exceed the speed limit, so there's no need for unnecessary concern. An accident is not in my cards." Emma nodded, but her eyes still reflected worry, as if she feared he was already doomed. "All right then, get back to work, and don't dwell on the negatives. By the way, how are your little ones? If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll help however I can," James said warmly as he headed towards his office. "Thank you." "Everything's fine, Mr. Williams. I just need your permission for something," Emma asked cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "Permission? Of course, go ahead." "What do you need?" James replied, intrigued. Emma hesitated for a moment, gathering her courage, then said, "I want to ask for your permission to take home the dishes that customers reject. Just one or two. I'll pay for everything, don't worry. Can it be deducted from my salary?" James smiled kindly. "Yes, of course. What's the matter? And no payment is necessary. They're going to be disposed of anyway. Besides, it seems both you and the kids will benefit. Take as many as you want, it's just leftovers." Joyful sparks danced in Emma's eyes. This was a real stroke of luck for her. Meanwhile, James continued with his usual business, engrossed in phone calls with the restaurant manager, approving menus, and preparing for inspections to ensure everything ran smoothly. Yet from time to time, Emma's words resurfaced in his mind, unsettling him slightly. Can you believe it? A kitchen worker with fortune-telling abilities. That's a first for me, James thought, shaking his head. But soon, the thoughts of a potential road accident faded away, replaced by meetings with new suppliers, tasting new dishes, and discussing current restaurant matters with the administrator. Throughout the day, James maintained an atmosphere of trust and cooperation. He resolved disputes gently, using the stick far less often than the carrot, fostering a sense of unity among his team. However, despite his busy schedule, he couldn't completely shake off the lingering concern sparked by Emma's vision. As the evening approached, James found himself reflecting more deeply on Emma's words. Her sincerity had left an indelible mark on him. Deciding to be cautious, he opted to call a cab for his journey home, despite his usual confidence in his driving abilities. In the cab, he couldn't help but think about Emma's situation. Her dedication to her children and her work ethic impressed him. He made a mental note to find more ways to support her and other employees who might be struggling. The drive home was uneventful, but James felt a sense of relief and an unexpected connection to the young woman who had warned him. The next morning, James arrived at the restaurant with a renewed sense of purpose. He greeted Emma warmly, noticing the relief in her eyes. "Good morning, Emma. How are you today? And your little ones?" Emma smiled a genuine, heartfelt smile. "They're doing well. Thank you, Mr. Williams. And thank you for allowing me to take the leftovers. It means a lot." "Of course, Emma. We're a team, and we look out for each other. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to ask," James replied, his tone earnest. Emma nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Williams. I won't forget your kindness." James watched her go about her work with a newfound appreciation for the small acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. As he continued with his day, ensuring the restaurant ran smoothly, he couldn't help but feel that Emma's vision, whether true or not, had brought about a positive change in his approach to leadership and compassion. Later that week, as James reviewed the restaurant's operations, he implemented a new policy allowing all staff to take home rejected or leftover food. It was a small gesture, but it significantly boosted morale. The employees felt more valued and appreciated, and the restaurant thrived under this new spirit of camaraderie. In the months that followed, the restaurant saw unprecedented success. The sense of community and mutual respect that James fostered became its hallmark. Every time he looked at Emma, he remembered the vision that had initially unsettled him, but ultimately led to a deeper understanding of the importance of empathy and support in leadership. James never did encounter the predicted accident, but the lesson Emma imparted stayed with him. It wasn't about believing in visions or prophecies, it was about caring for those around him and making a positive impact in their lives. In the end, that made all the difference. Time passed unnoticed as the clock ticked past the 3-hour mark. The storm's fury still raged, but its initial morning impact had lessened. The city's utility crews had surprisingly managed to take control of the situation quickly, clearing most of the vital roads. Although there was still an hour and a half left in the workday, James decided to leave early. He had concocted an interesting plan to fill this cold February evening with an aura of love and romance. Determined to pamper his spouse, James decided to surprise her with a gorgeous bouquet of roses, a bottle of fine wine, and a few culinary delights from his own restaurant's kitchen. The last 2 items didn't take him much time, but finding flowers in the snow-covered city turned into a real quest. To James's immense dismay, most of the flower shops were closed. It seemed the shop owners had decided that no one would be interested in buying flowers on such a stormy day. Just when James was about to lose hope, he spotted a small shop on the corner of the street that was still open. With a joyous heart, James parked his car by the roadside and stepped inside. The pavilion smelled pleasantly of roses, tulips, and freshly imported mimosa. It was the end of February, just under 2 weeks until the beloved Women's Day. The salesperson, a rather pleasant young woman, quickly helped James put together the perfect bouquet. The businessman's heart sang with joy. He envisioned a romantic evening with his beloved Grace, eagerly awaiting his return. James knew Grace didn't usually prepare dinner for him, knowing he could satisfy his hunger at the restaurant. He took fruit and vegetable platters, champagne, and a couple of heavenly dishes prepared by Chef Frank. Upon arriving home, James didn't bother ringing the doorbell. He decided to use his key to open the door. As he stepped into the hallway, he heard subdued music coming from the bedroom. Grace must be watching her favorite series again, James thought as he walked into the kitchen with the bags in his hands. He left the bouquet in the living room, planning to present it to her later. With a joyful expression, James entered the bedroom. His hand, holding the bouquet, involuntarily dropped, causing a couple of rose petals to fall to the floor. The room was empty. Grace was not there. The TV was on, but she was gone. Panic began to set in. Where could she have gone, especially in such a snowstorm? What if something had happened to her? Grace was not confident behind the wheel, a fact James knew all too well. A frantic thought flashed through his mind. I need to check the garage. He rushed out of the bedroom, his heart pounding in his chest. James hurried to the garage, hoping to find her car safely parked. He fumbled with the door handle, his mind racing with worry. As he opened the garage door, relief washed over him. The car was there. He sighed deeply, his body relaxing slightly. Returning to the house, James tried to calm his racing thoughts. Maybe she had gone out for a walk or to visit a neighbor. He picked up his phone to call her, but then decided against it. If she was out, she would be back soon. He needed to stay calm. James busied himself in the kitchen, setting up the platters and pouring the champagne. He tried to focus on the evening he had planned, but his mind kept drifting back to Grace's absence. Minutes felt like hours as he waited for any sign of her return. Finally, he heard the sound of the front door opening. His heart leaped as he rushed to the hallway. There she was, standing in the doorway, covered in snow but safe and sound. James's relief was palpable as he hurried to her side. "Grace, I was so worried. Where did you go in this storm?" he exclaimed, wrapping his arms around her. Grace smiled softly, her cheeks flushed from the cold. "I'm sorry, James. I went to check on Mrs. Thompson next door. She needed help with her groceries, and I didn't want to bother you." James's worry melted away, replaced by admiration for his wife's kind heart. "You should have told me. I could have helped." Grace laughed, shaking the snow from her coat. "I know, but you were busy, and I wanted to surprise you." "Now, what's all this?" she asked, eyeing the bouquet and the setup in the living room. James grinned, taking her hand and leading her to the couch. "I wanted to surprise you with a romantic evening. Roses, champagne, and some delicious dishes from the restaurant." Grace's eyes sparkled with delight. "James, you always know how to make me feel special." They settled on the couch, the warmth of the fire and the soft glow of the candles creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere. As they sipped champagne and enjoyed the delicious food, the storm outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the warmth of their love. James looked into Grace's eyes, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I love you, Grace. Thank you for being the light in my life." Grace smiled, leaning in to kiss him. "And I love you, James. Thank you for always making me feel cherished." The evening was perfect, filled with laughter, love, and the joy of simply being together. Despite the storm and the worries of the day, James and Grace found solace in each other's arms, knowing that their love was the greatest gift of all. Just as James was leaving the bedroom, he caught the urgent broadcast on the local news. A car had fallen off the city bridge half an hour ago, driven by an inexperienced young woman. His heart pounded with dread. My God, it's Grace, of course. Who else could it be? I even transferred money to her card to buy a new dress today. That's why she must have gone out. Without a second thought, James rushed out of the house, his mind a whirlwind of fear and regret. He sped towards the bridge, his car skidding dangerously on the icy roads. His experience and intimate knowledge of his car's handling capabilities kept him in control, but Grace had only recently started driving. Why had he even bought her that car? With just under 2 miles to the bridge, James's car skidded again. He slammed the brakes, but they failed, leaving him with a life-threatening decision: swerve into the ditch or crash into the small car parked by the roadside. Instinctively, he chose the ditch. The car rolled several times before crashing into a tree. The last thing he remembered was the sharp smell of gasoline from the damaged fuel tank, the potential for a devastating explosion hanging in the air. Now James lay in a hospital room, the persistent beeping of life support machines the only indication of life. He pondered the events that had led him here. He realized with painful clarity that the girl who had fallen from the bridge was not Grace. In the heat of the moment, his reason had abandoned him. Now, he understood that his wife had been meeting with her lover, whom she valued above all else. The will he had drawn up at her insistence a few months ago now seemed ominously significant. The thought of Grace's betrayal fueled his consciousness, preventing him from accepting his fate. Deciding to feign a coma, James tightly shut his eyes whenever Grace was near, masking any signs of awareness. He could feel her piercing, hateful gaze, her fingers itching to press the buttons that would disconnect him from life support. The temptation was so strong that her hands trembled, and her lips formed a thin, determined line. The most painful realization for James was his powerlessness to prevent her from carrying out her plan. The danger was so palpable that he could almost feel death's cold breath on his neck. Fortunately, the clicking of high heels echoed in the corridor, causing Grace to retreat hastily. Moments later, the familiar voice of Dr. Merritt filled the room. It's mind-boggling. She's ready to bury him alive. And why marry such vipers? His conversation partner paused, then replied, "What's so surprising about it? They say this patient owns an elite restaurant in the city, and he has also made a will." From the speaker's tone, James deduced she was a nurse. Dr. Merritt approached James's bed, examining the machines. "Strange. Some sensors are disabled, Erica. Probably a malfunction. We need to call a specialist. It will take time for a patient to come out of a coma, but I'm sure he'll survive against all odds and prove that a miracle in such a case is quite possible." Erica nodded, watching the departing doctor before attending to the finicky sensors. James, still feigning unconsciousness, took in every word. He knew he had to find a way to protect himself and expose Grace's treachery. As he lay there, his mind raced with plans and possibilities. The betrayal cut deep, but his determination to survive and reclaim his life was stronger. He would bide his time, gather his strength, and when the moment was right, he would act. The road ahead was uncertain, but James was resolved to navigate it, no matter the cost. But before she could turn one of the machines on, James whispered weakly, "Water, please. I need water." The nurse, startled by the unexpected sound, almost jumped. "So you've woken up. Why didn't you signal?" James gathered his remaining strength and whispered, "Please, don't tell anyone that I've regained consciousness. We can't hide it from the attending physician, but let it be a secret for at least today." Erica pondered his request. It sounded odd, but given his wife's behavior, it didn't seem out of the ordinary anymore. "All right, I'll keep it quiet, but you still can't drink. The most I can do is moisten your lips," she whispered. James closed his eyes in relief, acknowledging that the nurse was right. A few minutes later, a piece of cotton soaked in water touched his lips, providing the much-needed moisture. He parted his lips slightly to absorb the precious liquid, trying to quench his thirst even a little. It wasn't much, but James didn't insist. The crucial thing was that he was alive and had escaped the burning car. As James contemplated his situation, Erica set up an IV drip to supply his body with nutrients. Tears of gratitude glistened in his eyes as he saw how caring and dedicated she was, doing her best to help him despite everything. "No, they won't get my will and inheritance. I will recover and won't let Grace get a penny in the divorce," he vowed silently, growing more resolute in his thoughts. Swallowing the lump in his throat with difficulty, James closed his eyes and drifted into a deep sleep. Meanwhile, Erica went to Dr. Merritt's office and relayed everything that had happened. Dr. Merritt listened intently, appreciating her subordinate's vigilance and good intentions. "Well, I won't inform his wife about his progress. If I were in her place, I'd be praying day and night for my husband's recovery. But this witch only cares about her inheritance. Thank you for being observant and doing an excellent job, Erica." Joyful sparks lit up in the nurse's eyes at the doctor's praise. Back in his room, James's sleep was fitful, filled with fragmented dreams and memories. He replayed the events leading up to the accident, the panic, the fear, and now the revelation of Grace's betrayal. It all seemed surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. But amid the chaos, one thing remained clear: he had to protect himself and his future. The next morning, James woke to the soft beeping of the machines. Erica was by his side, adjusting the IV drip. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. How are you feeling?" she asked gently. "Better. Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Erica nodded. "Remember, you must keep up the pretense of being in a coma. Only Dr. Merritt and I know you're awake. We need to ensure your safety." James nodded weakly, appreciating her concern. As the day progressed, he watched the interactions around him, noting who came to visit and who didn't. Grace appeared in the afternoon, her face a mask of concern, but James saw through it now. She approached his bed, her movements hesitant, as if weighing her options. "James, I hope you can hear me," she began, her voice falsely sweet. "I've been so worried about you. Please get better soon." She sat by his bedside, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of his consciousness. James lay still, his eyes closed, his breathing even. Grace sighed, a hint of impatience creeping into her expression. She reached out to touch his hand, her fingers cold against his skin. "You have to wake up, James. We need you," she murmured, though James felt the emptiness in her words. As she left, James felt a renewed sense of determination. He would survive this ordeal, not just physically but emotionally and mentally. He would rebuild his life, free from betrayal and deceit, with Erica and Dr. Merritt's help. He would navigate this precarious situation and emerge stronger. In the days that followed, James continued to play the part of a comatose patient. Erica kept a close watch, ensuring his safety and discreetly providing updates on his condition. Dr. Merritt coordinated with the hospital staff, keeping them unaware of James's true state. James used the quiet moments to plan his next steps. He knew he needed to secure his financial assets and make legal arrangements to protect himself from Grace. He also considered how to rebuild his life once he recovered. The betrayal had hurt deeply, but it also fueled his resolve to create a future where he was in control, surrounded by people he could trust. As the weeks passed, James's strength slowly returned. He began to communicate more with Erica and Dr. Merritt, discussing his plans and gaining their support. They helped him contact a trusted lawyer who started working on the necessary legal measures to safeguard his interests. Grace's visits became less frequent, her patience wearing thin. Each time she came, James could feel her growing frustration and desperation. It was only a matter of time before she made a move, and he had to be ready. One evening, as James lay in bed, he overheard a conversation outside his room. Grace was speaking to someone in hushed tones, her voice tense. "I can't keep waiting. We need to move forward with our plan. The doctors say there's no significant improvement." James's heart raced as he strained to hear more. The person she was speaking to responded, their voice too low to catch. But the urgency in Grace's tone was unmistakable. James knew he had to act quickly. He signaled Erica as she passed by, whispering urgently, "It's time. We need to put our plan into motion." Erica nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. She contacted Dr. Merritt, and together they devised a strategy to ensure James's safety and expose Grace's true intentions. The next morning, Dr. Merritt called Grace into his office. "Mrs. Williams, we have some developments regarding your husband's condition. We need to discuss them." Grace's face lit up with feigned concern. "Of course, doctor. What is it?" Dr. Merritt leaned forward, his expression serious. "We've noticed some anomalies with the life support machines and your husband's vital signs. We believe there may have been tampering." Grace's eyes widened in shock. Tampering? Who would do such a thing? Dr. Merritt's gaze was unwavering. "That's what we intend to find out. In the meantime, we will be implementing additional security measures to ensure Mr. Williams's safety." As Grace left the office, her mind raced. She hadn't expected this turn of events. James, lying in his hospital bed, felt a glimmer of hope. The trap was set, and soon the truth would come to light. In the following days, security around James's room was tightened. Grace's movements were closely monitored, and the hospital staff was briefed on the situation. James continued to feign unconsciousness, his resolve growing stronger with each passing day. Finally, the moment of reckoning arrived. Grace, believing she had outsmarted everyone, attempted to access James's room under the guise of a concerned wife. But as she approached his bed, the security team intercepted her, revealing their true intentions. "Mrs. Williams, you're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy," the lead officer declared, handcuffing her as she protested vehemently. James opened his eyes, his gaze steady and unyielding. "Grace, it's over. The truth is out." As Grace was led away, James felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The ordeal had been harrowing, but he had emerged victorious. With Erica and Dr. Merritt's support, he uncovered the betrayal and protected his future. In the months that followed, James focused on his recovery and rebuilding his life. He reconnected with trusted friends and colleagues, finding solace in their unwavering support. The restaurant thrived under his renewed leadership, and James found a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. He had learned a valuable lesson: true strength came not from wealth or status, but from the people who stood by him in his darkest moments. And with that knowledge, James looked forward to a future filled with hope, resilience, and the promise of new beginnings. It's not that James was particularly attractive to Erica. It was simply that her desire to help outweighed everything else. Meanwhile, Grace made her fiery presence known at the restaurant, taking advantage of her husband's coma to establish her own rules. Naturally fiery red, she swept through the establishment like a force of nature, her cold and harsh gaze piercing each employee. She harbored sincere indifference and contempt towards their personalities. The head chef was the first to face her wrath, receiving a reprimand and a fine for using expensive ingredients. "Mrs. Williams, but it's not like that. It's long been known that the quality of ingredients affects the final result," the man protested, trying to reason with her. Grace's cheeks flushed with anger. "Don't you dare talk back to me here. Do you hear? What I say goes, and from now on, decisions are made only by me. If you don't like it, go work in a roadside diner. Your talents will be more suitable there." "All right, Mrs. Williams, I understand," the head chef said gloomily, lowering his head. Andrew smirked, pleased with the new manager's aggressive approach. Unlike James, who had been soft and attentive, Grace favored a more ruthless method of running the business. Approaching her like a jackal during a lion's feast, the administrator remarked, "Mrs. Williams, if I may suggest for added effect, you should consider utilizing hidden surveillance cameras." Grace looked at Andrew with surprise, clearly impressed. "And are there such cameras here?" The administrator smiled contentedly. "Of course. How else?" "True, Mr. Williams didn't like to watch the videos and only resorted to them in cases of extreme necessity. More often than not, the cameras are simply turned off. But since the boss had the accident, I've kept them on. It's immediately evident when someone is in their element. Unlike the lax management of my dear husband, such tricks won't fly with me." "Well done, Andrew. Your idea with the cameras is simply invaluable," Grace exclaimed, eliciting a satisfied smile from the administrator. A few minutes later, Grace started the recordings and leaned in to monitor every move of the staff. Initially, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Waitresses bustled around the hall, the head chef commanded in the kitchen, and the waiter greeted clients at the entrance. Everything was as usual until Grace noticed yesterday's recording of a young dishwasher with a bulky bag in her hands. "Look at her, so clever. What could she possibly be carrying in such a bag?" Grace muttered. "Probably empties the fridge before leaving and takes it all home. And all this right under the nose of my foolish husband," she mused. Upon closer inspection of Emma, Grace decided to catch her red-handed. "Let's see how you sing when I corner you." Poor Emma had no idea she was under close surveillance. Time dragged on, slowly approaching the inevitable moment of reckoning. At the end of her shift, Emma grabbed a few leftovers approved by the head chef and headed towards the exit. She had done this before, ever since James allowed her to take home some of the untouched dishes. But today, things took a different turn. Seeing Emma with a canvas utility bag in her hands, Grace approached the doorway triumphantly. "And where do you think you're going, dear? Scooped up a bag full of delicacies and intend to just leave my restaurant like that?" Emma flinched, looking at the hostess with a hunted gaze, genuine sadness and despair evident in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Williams, but I haven't stolen anything. These are just leftovers, you know, the ones that were paid for but remained untouched by the customers." Grace's eyes narrowed with disdain. "Leftovers or not, you have no right to take anything without my explicit permission. My husband was too lenient, but that ends now. Hand over the bag and consider this your final warning." Emma's heart sank. She had depended on those leftovers to feed her children. Tears welled up in her eyes as she handed over the bag. "Please, Mrs. Williams, I need this food for my family. I promise I won't take anything again without asking." Grace snatched the bag from Emma's hands, her expression unyielding. "Your promises mean nothing to me. Follow the rules or find another job. This is your last chance." Emma nodded, defeated, and hurried out of the restaurant, her spirit crushed. She knew she had no choice but to comply or risk losing her job altogether. As Grace watched Emma leave, she felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. She turned to Andrew, who was watching the scene with a smirk. "Keep an eye on her. If she steps out of line again, she's out." Andrew nodded eagerly. "Of course, Mrs. Williams. I'll make sure of it." Meanwhile, James lay in his hospital bed, unaware of the turmoil unfolding at his restaurant. He focused on his recovery, driven by the hope of reclaiming his life and protecting his legacy from Grace's ruthless grasp. Back at the restaurant, the atmosphere grew tense under Grace's iron-fisted rule. The employees, once loyal and content, now worked in fear of her wrath. Morale plummeted, and the once vibrant establishment began to lose its charm. Days turned into weeks, and James's strength gradually returned. He stayed in close communication with Erica and Dr. Merritt, who updated him on the situation at the restaurant. Hearing about Grace's tyrannical management only fueled his determination to recover and take back control. One day, as Grace was berating a waiter for a minor mistake, Erica arrived at the restaurant with a message from James. "Mrs. Williams, may I have a word with you?" she asked politely. Grace turned, her eyes narrowing. "What is it?" "Mr. Williams has regained consciousness and is making a steady recovery. He has requested a meeting with his lawyer to discuss some urgent matters regarding the restaurant," Erica said, her tone calm but firm. Grace's face paled for a moment before she composed herself. "Very well. Inform him that I'll be there. But make it clear that the restaurant's operations are under my control now." Erica nodded, hiding her satisfaction. She knew that James's recovery would bring the much-needed change the restaurant and its staff desperately awaited. When Grace arrived at the hospital, she found James looking stronger and more resolute than she had expected. His eyes met hers with a mixture of sadness and determination. "Grace, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady. Grace took a seat, trying to mask her anxiety. "Of course, James. What do you need to discuss?" "I've been made aware of your actions at the restaurant. Your management style and treatment of the staff have caused significant distress. This is not how I envisioned the place we built together," James began, his tone calm but firm. Grace's facade cracked slightly. "I was just trying to keep things in order while you were recovering." James shook his head. "Order is one thing, but tyranny is another. I won't allow our business to be run with such ruthlessness. Effective immediately, you're no longer in charge of the restaurant." Grace's eyes widened in shock and anger. "You can't do this. I've been managing everything in your absence." "And I've seen the results," James replied, his gaze unwavering. "We will discuss the details with my lawyer, but understand this: I will not let you destroy what we've built with your cruelty." Grace stormed out of the room, her plans crumbling around her. James watched her go, feeling a mixture of relief and sorrow. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was determined to restore the restaurant to its former glory. With the support of Erica, Dr. Merritt, and his loyal staff, James began the process of healing and rebuilding. The restaurant slowly returned to its vibrant, welcoming atmosphere, and the employees regained their trust and morale. James learned that true strength lay in kindness and compassion, not in control and fear. As he stood at the helm of his beloved restaurant once more, he vowed to lead with integrity and care, ensuring that the legacy he had worked so hard to create would endure. The businesswoman sneered with venomous disdain. "Untouched, you say? And who decides that? Could it be you, darling? You seem to have quite the arrangement for yourself. What do we have here? Oh, a Caesar salad, half-eaten but still telling. You're quite the connoisseur, my dear." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, an unexpected wave of obnoxious cruelty threatening to turn her world upside down. "Oh, please, no need for those crocodile tears. They mean nothing to me. Understand? Once you lose your job, you can shed them every minute if you want," Grace remarked, her words cutting through Emma's composure. Emma sniffled miserably, rummaging through her bag. Just half an hour ago, she had paid for these dishes with her future salary, and now she faced dismissal on charges of theft she didn't commit. "Oh, looks like we caught a fish in the net, and the surname matches." "Fisher, and you were still hoping for the boss," remarked the approaching administrator. Grace exchanged a meaningful glance with Andrew and continued her merciless scolding. "But I didn't take it for myself. It was for the kids," Emma pleaded, her voice trembling. "Oh, spare me your family drama. I couldn't care less how many you have, 3, 4, or 5. It's your business. You gave birth to them. Deal with it yourself," Grace snapped bitterly. "She only has 2 of her own and 2 more from her husband's first marriage," the administrator added smugly. "They're all mine, and as for what my husband left, let it remain on his conscience. He's in prison now, caught stealing. He thought the kids would help him reduce his sentence, but I managed to get his rights revoked," Emma muttered through her tears. But Grace remained unmoved. What Grace needed right now was a scapegoat to demonstrate her power to everyone else, and Emma, caught in the crossfire, became just that. "So, how about you, Fisher? Right, well, you're fired. You can go wherever you want," Grace concluded, pointing towards the door. Despair froze in Emma's eyes. How could this be? Could she be dismissed like some unwanted stray dog? The administrator, not wanting to stay on the sidelines, added his 2 cents. "Oh, and I almost forgot, Fisher, don't count on your salary, you understand? The money will go towards compensating the damages." The news was a devastating blow to Emma. Realizing she had been deceived by everyone she trusted, she went outside, exposing her tear-streaked cheeks to the freezing wind. Seeing this, Henry couldn't help himself and approached. "Sheesh, dear, don't cry, don't torment yourself, sunshine. You know Andrew is in favor right now. That's why he's doing whatever he pleases. And when Mr. Williams recovers, his reign will come to an end. And so that you don't end up completely without money, I'll allocate some from my pension for you. You can repay it whenever you can." "No rush," said the janitor, embracing the fragile woman by the shoulders. "Thank you, Henry, for your support and protection. You see, I was counting so much on this money, and then this happened. We're struggling with the kids in a rented apartment, and the landlady keeps raising the rent, saying you receive child benefits so you won't become poor." Emma replied, choking back tears. The elderly man shook his head, his heart aching for Emma. Such a good colleague, calm, diligent, and never speaking ill of anyone. She washed dishes up to her elbows in hot water, and that was it. And this Andrew, the administrator, was a first-rate troublemaker. Henry remembered him from his work at the high school, where he had been a craft teacher for over 40 years. Andrew, as a student, had been extremely insolent, humiliating those poorer or physically weaker than him. Henry once tried to shame Andrew, but it was all in vain. Then, one night, the workshops for practicing crafts caught fire. Many blamed Henry, saying he didn't put out his cigarette properly, but he had never smoked in his life and always observed fire safety precautions. The mystery unraveled with Andrew, who had committed arson with a group of teenage friends. Metrick couldn't prove anything at the time, and was subsequently fired from the school with the corresponding note in his employment record. Overall, the dismissal didn't bother the crafts teacher too much, as he was formally retired by then and had no bread left on his plate for sure. After 17 long years since the fateful incident, destiny brought Andrew and the elderly janitor Henry Brooks together again, albeit in very different circumstances. Naturally, Andrew pretended not to recognize his former teacher, but Henry was no fool and had witnessed too much in life to trust Andrew's feigned ignorance. Yet, it was James who appealed to Henry, a man of honesty, kindness, fairness, and the very essence of a true leader. With the money Henry had given her clutched tightly in her hand, Emma slowly made her way towards the bus stop, hoping to catch her bus on time. The remnants of the recent snowstorm loomed on either side of the road, forming dirty gray mounds of snow that had fallen weeks ago. Lost in her sorrowful thoughts, Emma trudged along the street when she suddenly heard a muffled murmuring. Realizing she hadn't managed to distance herself far from the restaurant, Emma quickly turned around, expecting Henry to be following her to say something, but no one was behind her. The brisk frost lingered, nipping at her nose and rosy cheeks, acting like a cold reminder of her reality. The mysterious sound repeated, and Emma realized it was coming from a nearby snowdrift. Understanding that someone needed help, she cautiously approached and froze in shock. There, lying on the dirty gray snow, was a man with a bloody head, groaning softly and unconscious. Emma's first thought was that the stranger had simply had too much to drink and had fallen, hitting his head. But when she leaned over the young man, she immediately realized he was as sober as a judge. Without a second thought, Emma lifted the unfortunate man by his armpits and tried to get him on his feet. He was gradually regaining consciousness, indicating that the initial shock from the injury was wearing off. Damn, how could this happen? Bastards, don't touch Jack, the man muttered deliriously. Meanwhile, Emma, struggling under the weight of the stranger's body, led him to Henry's shed. Thinking that the injured man was simply delirious, she tried to ignore his muttering and persevered towards their destination. The man she had rescued was a vagabond and could have frozen to death in the bitter cold. Seeing the flushed Emma, Henry understood everything without words. Taking the man from the other side, he, with Emma's help, quickly laid him on the cot, which had once been a folding sofa. Well, that's better. Now let's treat the wound on his head. He'll probably recover soon, Henry sighed in relief, taking out bandages, cotton, and antiseptic from the first aid kit. Can you manage? Shouldn't we call an ambulance? Emma asked anxiously, but the janitor just shook his head. No, dear, there's no need. Why distract people from more important work? I wanted to be a doctor in my youth, but failed the entrance exams. Then I spent 1.5 years in medical school and decided to become a nurse, but even there luck wasn't on my side, so I had to become a laborer. But I know how to provide first aid, so don't worry. The lad is tough, street smart. He'll pull through. No doubt. Emma's face immediately lit up with a sweet smile as the wounded man opened his eyes and began to turn his head from side to side, trying to understand where he found himself. The scene was surreal. Emma, Henry, and the injured stranger an unlikely trio brought together by fate's cruel twist. Emma's heart ached as she watched the man struggle to make sense of his surroundings. The soft glow of the shed's light cast long shadows, mingling with the lingering cold that clung to their clothes. As Henry tended to the man's wounds with practiced care, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness mixed with determination. She knew that life had thrown them all into this moment for a reason, and she was resolute to see it through. The night air was filled with quiet tension, each breath they took visible in the frosty air, marking the beginning of a long, uncertain journey ahead. Easy there, buddy, easy. Sudden movements aren't recommended for you right now. Just lie down and regain your senses. Do you at least remember your name? Henry asked cautiously. The guy forced a weak smile. Of course I do. Connor, that's my name. Connor Sawyer. Got beaten up because of a dog. These rich kids wanted some fun with a victim, and they chose the dog, Jack. He's a street dog, you know. Settled near the meat pavilion, not afraid of people. So when I saw that villainy, I immediately rushed to help. I took down 2 of them on the snow, but the third one, the jerk, hit me on the head with something. Henry nodded sympathetically. Yeah, that kind of thing happens. Don't worry. Stay here as long as you need. I have firewood and a little stove here. You'll be as comfortable as can be. Connor looked gratefully at Emma, who had come to his aid in his moment of need. Glancing at her watch, she sighed sadly. Well, looks like I'll have to take a taxi now. There go my savings. I've already missed the bus. Connor sniffled with a guilty look and turned away to the wall. Feeling it was because of him, he said, "Forgive me, for God's sake. I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. I've been having quite the adventures lately. 3 weeks ago, I pulled a rich guy out of a burning car. Maybe you heard about it. It was quite a loud incident." Emma paled and involuntarily looked at her palm, remembering what happened to her during the revelation regarding Mr. William's future. We heard Connor. That was the restaurant owner. You know, the one Emma and I used to work for. Henry replied to both of them. We don't work there anymore. At least I don't. Emma corrected him immediately. The guy shook his head sadly and winced from the pain. His neck was stiff, and any slightly sharp movement caused a spasm. Easy, my friend, don't get agitated. And for saving James, our friend here, you deserve a special thank you. James was a very good person, and probably still is. The janitor corrected himself. I just happened to be there. It's not my territory. You see, us vagabonds, we divide everything by districts, by yards. Step onto someone else's turf, and you'll quickly get your ribs cracked, so you won't want to come back. But there, I saw it, an accident. And a pillar of smoke rising from it. People were running around, wailing, but no one was rushing to save the man. The gas tank could have exploded at any moment. The vagabond began his story. Henry looked at his interlocutor with undisguised respect. Deep down, he had long concluded that Connor was a good man. Otherwise, would he have rushed to the defense of a stray dog? Unlikely. Connor took a deep breath and, touching the wound on his temple with his fingers, continued, "As soon as I saw that someone could burn alive, I ran straight to the car. I smashed the glass with a cobblestone and started pulling him out of the car. All around, there was noise, chaos, and people shouting that the fuel tank would soon explode. It was all true, but you can't just leave the driver. Anyway, I made it, dragged him about 10 meters away, and then it went off. You, my friend, are a true hero to just throw yourself into the fire for our James," Henry said sorrowfully. Emma looked warmly at the rescued boy and caught herself thinking that all this seemed somehow not accidental. Connor saved James, she saved Connor. After that, it was hard to believe in coincidences. Since Emma couldn't delay any longer, she called a taxi and went home, where 4 hungry children were waiting for her: Nathan, Anna, Peter, and Emily. At the same time, James lay in a hospital bed, gradually coming to his senses. Of course, he still had little strength, and could barely hold a spoon and fork on his own. Erica and Dr. Merritt kept their word and skillfully fooled Grace for about 5 days, who had decided to disconnect her husband from life support machines and claim her rightful inheritance. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected. The man she had helped, the hero who had saved James, seemed to be a part of a larger story she was only beginning to understand. As she rode the taxi home, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The children greeted her with hungry smiles, their innocent faces a reminder of why she endured so much. Meanwhile, James' recovery was slow but steady. His strength was returning, and with it, a renewed determination. Erica and Dr. Merritt's deception had bought them time, and now, with James awake, they could plan their next move. In the cold, dimly lit shed, Henry and Connor bonded over shared stories and mutual respect. Henry admired Connor's bravery, not just for saving James, but for standing up to those who preyed on the vulnerable. Connor, on the other hand, saw in Henry a kindred spirit, a man who had faced his trials and emerged with his integrity intact. As the night deepened, the bond between them grew stronger, a beacon of hope amid their struggles. Emma's heart was heavy yet hopeful. She knew that her journey was far from over, but with allies like Henry and Connor, she felt she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As she tucked her children into bed that night, she whispered a prayer of gratitude and strength, vowing to protect and provide for them no matter the cost. The storm outside might have been cold and unforgiving, but inside her heart, a fire of determination burned brightly, illuminating the path forward. On the 5th day, James called Erica over and asked for help with another scheme. "I need to leave for a short while. You understand?" The nurse looked at him incredulously, wondering if he was joking. Less than a week ago, he had come out of a coma, and now he was planning an escape. "No, James, excuse me, but I won't take such responsibility. What if something happens to you? What should I do then?" Stand trial, Erica objected. Desperation froze in James's eyes. "Well, help me be a human, will you? I'll sign any document you want about understanding the consequences and relieving the clinic of all responsibility," he pleaded. Erica shook her head negatively, although she understood in her thoughts that she couldn't refuse the patient. Grace had been too unpleasant to her, rushing to get rid of her husband, not hesitating in her choice of means and accomplices. "Fine, I agree, but only if we go together, okay? It'll be calmer for both of us, just in the evening, a couple of hours before lights out," the nurse suggested, and immediately received an affirmative answer. Truth be told, James found it much more convenient himself, since he still didn't walk as confidently as before and could lose his balance at any moment. "Okay, Erica, but let's keep this between us. Not even Dr. Merritt should know, so that no one knows anything," the businessman pleaded, hopefully looking into her eyes. Erica nodded and began to prepare everything necessary for the breakout, taking with her medicines for emergencies and borrowing a walking stick from one of the clinic's patients. Meanwhile, James lay on the bed, gathering strength for the plan he had been considering for several days. And remembering Emma in his thoughts, the businessman couldn't hold back his tears. God, she was right all along. She spelled it out so clearly, and I, the fool, didn't believe her. Now I'm paying for my carelessness. Yes, Grace is also quite something. She got herself a lover and set her sights on my assets. Well, I'll settle the score with her, that's for sure. Although not with the same barbaric method she employs, the businessman thought with despair, closing his eyes and pretending to be a man who had fallen into a coma. Time stretched like rubber, and when Erica finally appeared in the ward with a set of clean clothes, James realized there was no turning back. "Here, get dressed. These are my ex-husband's things. We've been divorced for a long time, but he never bothered to take them. I think they'll fit you," Erica explained with a smile. James changed as quickly as he could, staggering under the weight of exhaustion, and followed the nurse. The injuries from the accident were taking their toll, forcing James to stop every 300 feet to catch his breath. It's worth mentioning Erica's understanding of his weakness. She did her best to support him, minimizing his time spent outside. Additionally, she hired a private driver who didn't rush and didn't ask unnecessary questions when faced with a weary client with a wooden stick in his hands. Arriving at his home, James felt overwhelming anxiety, the drumbeat pounding in his ears. Erica looked at him with concern, but it was too late to turn back now. James was simply obligated to finish what he had started. Only then would their efforts be justified, and no one would doubt their correctness and appropriateness. Stepping out of the car, he shivered in the cold wind and approached the door. He had his keys since they were with him, along with his wallet and smartphone, at the time of the accident. Inserting the key into the lock, James tried to turn it, realizing it didn't fit. Did Grace change them? She adapted to the new reality quickly. "I must say," James whispered, putting the useless key back in his pocket and pressing the doorbell. Instantly, a cheerful trill of a familiar melody filled the air. Erica stood a little aside, patiently awaiting the outcome. Soon, footsteps echoed from the depths of the house, and the door swung open, revealing the sturdy figure of James's wife's lover in James's bathrobe. This bathrobe had been a birthday gift from James's late mother, and this jerk wore it without a shred of conscience. Stunned by such audacity, the businessman froze in place, challenging the lover with his gaze. "Who's there, darling?" "Not the utilities again, I hope, but I've paid everything in advance for a month so we could relax at the resort." Grace's languid voice came from behind the stranger. James's heart pounded with a mixture of anger and betrayal. The sight of this man, comfortable in his home in his bathrobe, was almost too much to bear. "I'm not a utility worker," James said, his voice low and controlled. "I'm the owner of this house, and you, my friend, are trespassing." The lover's face paled as he realized who stood before him. Before he could react, Grace appeared behind him, her face transforming from confusion to shock. "James." But how she stammered. James took a deep breath, steadying himself with the walking stick. "Surprised to see me, Grace? I bet you didn't expect me to recover so soon." Grace's eyes darted nervously between James and her lover. "This is not what it looks like," she started, but James cut her off. "Save it. I've heard enough excuses. You were so eager to get rid of me, to claim everything for yourself. Well, guess what? I'm not going anywhere." Erica, sensing the escalating tension, stepped forward. "Let's take this inside, away from prying eyes," she suggested softly. The three of them moved into the house, leaving the lover standing awkwardly at the door. "You too," James motioned for him to follow. They settled in the living room, the silence thick with unspoken words. James looked at Grace, his eyes filled with a mixture of hurt and determination. "I don't know why you did this, but I won't let you ruin everything I've built. We will sort this out, legally and fairly. You will not get away with your schemes." Grace's lover fidgeted uncomfortably, clearly out of his depth. Grace, however, straightened up, her face hardening. "Do you think you can just waltz back in here and take control? I have rights too, and I've done nothing wrong." James shook his head, the weight of betrayal pressing down on him. "We'll see about that, Grace. For now, I'm back, and I'm not going to let you destroy what's mine." Erica watched the scene unfold, ready to intervene if necessary. She knew this was only the beginning of a long and difficult battle for James, but she was determined to help him see it through. As the night wore on, plans were made, and James's resolve only grew stronger. He would fight for his life, his business, and for the justice that had been denied to him. With Erica by his side, he knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead and reclaim the life that was rightfully his. James paled, his fists clenching painfully. Grace understood immediately, and unashamed by the presence of her lover, dropped to her knees. "James, please forgive me. It's not what you think, I swear." I thought you had only a few days left. The doctor didn't make any prognosis, and miracles don't happen, or do they, darling? James ground his teeth, speaking through gritted teeth. I'll give you 5 minutes to gather your things and leave this house. Grace's lover straightened his powerful shoulders and looked mockingly at the homeowner. Listen, unfinished businessman, go get yourself treated. And don't interfere with normal people's lives. It's a pity you didn't crash back then. James clenched the handle of his cane so tightly that his fingers turned white. You won't have to wait, you bastard. You thought you buried me alive, but I survived against all odds, and I'm sure the accident was staged. I'll uncover the truth. At the mention of this, the bully immediately wilted and wandered deeper into the house to change. The fairy tale of a rainbow relationship with Grace ended as abruptly as it began, and now it was time for payback for everything that had happened. Although James couldn't prove Grace's involvement in the accident, he deprived her of means of existence, blocking all her cards and accounts. Once upon a time, James had pulled Grace out of provincial obscurity, doing everything to make her feel like a businesswoman. But after such betrayal, he couldn't forgive the traitor. Long ago, he saved Grace from criminal prosecution for fraud she allegedly didn't commit. In reality, she was a hardened criminal who only cared about enriching herself. Now, due to new circumstances, James called the investigator again and said that his ex-wife's case should be reinvestigated. Upon hearing this, Grace grabbed a heavy vase to hit her husband on the head, but Erica was vigilant and intercepted the fraudster's hand in time. At that moment, several police cars pulled up to the house, and officers in plain clothes, armed to the teeth, stepped out. For Grace and her lover, it was all over. James, on the other hand, looked at his handcuffed ex-wife with a sad gaze and collapsed from exhaustion. If Erica hadn't been there, he might have fallen into a coma again, but instead, he gently sank to the ground, supported by the caring hands of the young nurse. James didn't hear the wail of the ambulance anymore and woke up only the next morning, startled by the muffled voices. This time, it wasn't his wife discussing his will with her lover, it was his loyal and trustworthy friends, the janitor Henry, the dishwasher Emma, and the homeless man Connor. James blinked, disoriented, as he tried to make sense of the scene before him. Henry's familiar, grizzled face broke into a relieved smile. "Welcome back, James. We've been worried sick about you." Emma stepped closer, her eyes filled with concern and determination. "We're here for you, James. We won't let anything happen to you again." Connor, looking a bit cleaner but still sporting his street-worn attire, nodded earnestly. "You saved my life once, it's my turn to help you." Tears welled up in James's eyes, the weight of betrayal and the warmth of true friendship mingling in his heart. "Thank you, all of you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Erica, standing nearby, smiled gently. "You're not alone in this, James. We're all here to make sure you get through this." The morning light streamed through the window, casting a hopeful glow over the room. Despite the exhaustion, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had been given a second chance, and he wouldn't waste it. With his friends by his side, he knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they discussed their plans, the bond between them grew stronger, a testament to the power of loyalty, friendship, and the human spirit's resilience. James took a deep breath, ready to embark on this new chapter of his life. He had lost much, but he had gained something far more valuable: the unwavering support of true friends. With them, he could rebuild his life and uncover the truth, bringing justice to those who had wronged him. And so, with determination in his heart and hope in his eyes, James faced the future, knowing he was not alone. Upon a more detailed examination, the businessman instantly recognized the unsung hero who had courageously rescued him from the flaming car. This heroic figure wished to keep his identity hidden, not seeking any form of recognition or accolades. With a heartfelt embrace, Connor gently grasped Emma's shoulders and hesitantly revealed his decision to vanish due to the overwhelming fear of unwanted publicity. He spoke slowly, his voice trembling with emotion, explaining how the spotlight made him uneasy and how he longed for a life of quiet anonymity. As Connor's words reached James's ears, he couldn't help but think about the immense potential and dedication this man possessed. James was certain he wanted Connor to manage his restaurant, envisioning him as a leader who would bring integrity and passion to the business. This notion resonated deeply with Emma, who had tirelessly worked her way up, earning her promotion to waitress or potentially even assistant chef through sheer hard work and determination. She had proven her worth time and again, and now she stood on the cusp of choosing her path, her future brimming with possibilities. Regardless of her choice, James was prepared to grant any of their desires, recognizing their dedication and loyalty. However, before any of these plans could come to fruition, his foremost priority was to publicly declare his feelings for Erica. These feelings had blossomed amid the recent adversities, growing stronger with each challenge they faced together. Tears shimmered in the nurse's eyes as she listened, her heart swelling with emotion. Her response, filled with genuine affection, sparked a thunderous applause from everyone around. "Yes, I accept," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "But please, promise to steer clear of hospitals in the future." Her plea was a mix of concern and love, reflecting the depth of her feelings. Connor grinned and, with a knowing wink at Emma, subtly indicated his unwavering support for the young businessman. He even went a step further, expressing his readiness to become the father of her 4 or perhaps 5 children, his eyes twinkling with hope and love. Who could tell what the future held? With mutual love and respect, everything else would seamlessly fall into place. Weddings filled with joy, pregnancies bringing new life, and the joyous laughter of children filling their lives with happiness and purpose. The trials they had faced had only strengthened their bonds, and now, standing on the brink of a new chapter, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held. The warmth and support of their loved ones, combined with their unwavering faith in each other, promised a life filled with endless possibilities and boundless joy. And so, as our story draws to a close, we witness the power of love, courage, and unwavering support in overcoming life's challenges. These individuals, each facing their trials, have shown us the strength found in unity, the importance of recognizing unsung heroes, and the beauty of embracing new beginnings with hope and determination. What have you learned from this heartfelt journey? We would love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below on one lesson you've learned and how you plan to bring it into practice in your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories and uplifting content. Thank you for watching.